Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Visual Studio Remote Office Hours. My name is Matt Kristensen, and I will be your host for the next hour or so. And today, we're going to talk about something that I don't think we've ever talked about before, really, from Microsoft, and that is running the Microsoft developer blogs. There's a whole lot there. There's a whole team behind all that, and it's much bigger than you might think. So, let's hear from Radhika. Hello, Radhika. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name is Radhika. I've been with Microsoft 10 years this year, actually. And in all this time, I've been a PM on the IDE team. That's actually where I started. And at the time, one of the blogs was owned by the IDE team. And so I took ownership of that. And then from there, it grew to the blog, which was an IDE blog, becoming a Visual Studio blog. And then from there, owning the DevBlogs platform as we moved away from MSDN. So that's kind of a quick, short story of where I landed and how I landed on the blogs.
Yeah, right. So you have been, you've basically been on the team dealing with the blogs for many years. Are you
different roles? Yeah.
So you might be the person that knows the most about our blogs.
Maybe. Like if you had some questions about the history of MSDN, what happened, or where we are, where have all the blogs gone? Yeah. So
that is
definitely help answer.
That is definitely something I'm curious about, like what happened to the old MSDN blogs. But before we even get to any of that sort of stuff, I am kind of interested in just knowing, like, if you can just tell us, what are the blogs? What are we talking about here? Is it more than one blog? Is it for all of Microsoft? Like, what is it? What do you own?
Okay, so devblogs.microsoft.com is the website we're talking about, which is a developer blogs blogging platform. And it hosts more than 40 blogs from across Microsoft. We started 2 years ago is when we launched, actually February 2019. So just completing 2 years being live. And when we started off with the goal of moving developer divisions, technical blogs like .NET, C++, Visual Studio, DevOps, off of MSDN as MSDN was retiring, and creating and finding a new home for it. So we wanted all our blogs, technical blogs, to be together. And for various reasons, without getting into the history, we started working on our own platform, devblogs.microsoft.com. And over time, I know when I say over time, it sounds really long, but over the past 2 years is what I mean. We've had a lot of blogs from across Microsoft that want a technical space where there are other technical blogs. And so we now host more than 40 blogs. And have various different technologies that we talk about. Like there's a blog on Q#, Windows Command Line, Surface Duo's technical blog that talks about how you can create applications on Surface Duo, and the likes. Math in Office, which I wasn't even aware of and didn't know it was a thing until it came up. So yeah, we are a 40 blog strong platform. And to answer your first question, it's not one blog, but it's a space that has multiple blogs on it.
Okay. Well, thank you for setting the stage. And so 40 different blogs. Are they all on the same platform? Meaning, do you update when you have a code change, let's say, do you roll that out to all the blogs at the same time, or is it one at a time? Are they separate installs, or is it one big platform?
Nope, it's one huge, gigantic thing. I mean, technically in the backend, we have different databases to separate out the content for each of these blogs to have their own space. Also because the top navigation and some of the customizations, like if you go to each blog, there is a hero on the homepage, and that might look different. The context that is set for each blog might be slightly different. And so there is that content bit, which is hosted in a different database for each blog. But in terms of the code and updating all of that, it's typically done in one big push.
Okay. And so what kind of software are we running? Is it our own? What is it?
We are hosted in WordPress by WP Engine. on their cloud space. And yeah, that's where we're at.
Okay. Was that always the case, or is that something that you did like those 2 years ago?
Actually, no, that was always the case. So MSDN blogs, MSDN TechNet, that whole huge thing in the past that used to host our docs, that used to host our Visual Studio downloads at one point and forums and everything, they were hosted in WordPress. And since at that time, when MSDN was owned by the separate team altogether, I owned the Visual Studio blog and the content on that. And we had a really good experience with the editorial features and capabilities and just how easy it was to get around to doing that. And since there was that existing knowledge that all these technical teams, engineering teams across DevDev had with working with WordPress, so that's why we just decided to continue working with them. And
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I write a lot of the blog posts on your blog platform, and it's a wonderful experience. And I think WordPress has proven that they're pretty good. So I understand why you chose to keep that around. Okay, so before February, I think you said 2019. So back when there was the MSDN blogs, I remember like that there were individuals, like both Microsoft employees, but also people from the community. They could open their own blog that was then hosted under msdn.microsoft.com.
Yeah.
But that no longer exists. Is that right?
No, it doesn't. So at the time, from what I understand, when MSDN was set up, I'm actually not sure if folks from outside Microsoft could create blogs as well. I'm not sure about that. But within Microsoft, you didn't need to have a team backing you up on a topic to have to blog. So you could set up your own personal blog, so to say, but on MSDN. So you could speak about anything you wanted. And a lot of individuals did take advantage of that and did do really well. I think some of the examples are folks from our leadership, whether it was Brian Harry, Buck Hodges, Cesar De La Torre, all these names are pretty prevalent in the dev technical space. Or else you have Raymond Chen, whose blog is Old New Thing, which is one of the top performing blogs on MSDN. And Raymond talks about everything to do with Windows, why a certain decision was made, how certain specific thing came about to be, or how to get around a specific issue. And so it has nothing to do with a product or its announcements or what's coming live, as much as a lot of the history of what happens. And while that was the case, MSDN just had way too many individuals who were enthusiastic and started a blog. But after 2 posts or 5 posts or maybe a year of publishing content, they moved teams or they changed their subject matter expertise and they no longer published content on that topic, which was bad from a blog platform point of view, because now this platform was left with maintaining all these different blogs that didn't even have active content. And from a user, from a reader point of view, it's not a good experience when you see content that you're interested in on a particular topic, and then that topic is no longer getting attention. And there's this perception then that Microsoft or that team may not be paying attention. But that's not really the case, because it was this individual who chose to stop writing about that because of various reasons, various things that might have happened. And so because of that, and when MSDN deprecated that platform, and we chose to move some of our technical blogs off there because we didn't want them to be archived and still create an active space. At the time, we had to then make a decision to say which of these blogs we are going to move forward and bring them on, even if they're not really active anymore, like Brian Harry in his blog, but still keep them because the content is useful. So there's all of that had to be taken care of. And that was pretty much what the entire year of 2018 was spent doing, is identifying what platform we want to move to, creating a team so that we could build this new platform, and then identifying of the thousands of blogs that were there, which are the ones that are of most value to our readers and what we should be moving forward in whatever form.
Yeah, that's really interesting that kind of today we take for granted on social media, let's say Twitter, that all these different Microsoft employees, they have their own Twitter account, right? And they tweet about all sorts of Microsoft things, like what they do in their job and that's relevant to Like we have like a bunch of people on the .NET team, right? They tweet a bunch about the .NET work they're doing, but it's not under the Microsoft flag, right? It's their personal thing. So they also show, pictures of their food or whatever that is not related to Microsoft.
Yeah.
But when it was on the MSDN blogs, even though it was a personal thing, it was still under the Microsoft logo. It looked kind of very Microsofty to the user, but internally for us, it was kind of the same, right? As if they just had a Twitter account. We just hosted them, and that must have led to some confusion for the users, I'm sure.
Yeah, and even in terms of content, like how are readers supposed to know whether a piece of content is that individual's opinion about a technology and whether it solves the problem it is supposed to solve, or whether that's Microsoft's take or the team's take on it. And it was really getting hard to distinguish between those. And so that's why on dev blogs, as we've been creating and hosting new blogs, we've had to very carefully gauge whether we should have team blogs only or whether individuals should still be allowed to have a blog. But maybe if they have a team backing them and it is an individual who is actually going to be doing content only and that's their day job and they don't have anything else, then there is that confidence that there will be a continuous stream of content coming through without leaving our readers abandoned. And even though it's an individual's name, there's still a team and Microsoft backing the content.
That's actually a really interesting thing, because when I was working on the Visual Studio extensibility team, I was asking if we could have our own blog so that we could blog just about extending Visual Studio and nothing else. It would not be mixed in with other topics that, of course, if it's the Visual Studio blogs, it's everything that pertains to Visual Studio. Yeah. And so if we have a specific topic like extensibility, well, I felt like maybe that would drown a little bit. But I remember we had this conversation. This is like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
And we had this conversation about, well, who's going to blog? How often? You might think it's fun now, but what about in a year? Just like what you're saying. Yeah. What if you're no longer on the team? Is anyone else then going to blog? And, it quickly became pretty obvious that, having our own blog is problematic. And we came up with just, hey, let's just tag all our things with the word extensibility or something like that, so that you could easily navigate to see just that content if you wanted to. And so I guess that was an exercise you had to do with a lot of the existing blogs, right, on MSDN.
Yeah.
It was a similar exercise. That must have taken forever.
Yeah, much longer than I expected when I first took on this project. In 2017, actually, was when the first conversation started about MSDN looking to deprecate in early 2019. And there are all these different blogs, and what are we going to do? And at the time, I only owned the content on the Visual Studio blog. But I was kind of this representative for all of DevDiv's blogs. So if the MSDN platform wanted to make any changes and they had to communicate to the blog owners, they was typically, they would reach out to me and then I would communicate it to everyone or take feedback back to them. And so since I was in that position, I started the conversations with the MSDN team about what was going to happen and how the deprecation would take place and which blogs, what's even happening in this space. And so at that time, we did have this huge Excel list of all the 6,000 blogs and then try to identify which one of those were owned by DevDiv and then scope it down to, okay, we're going to work with these blogs and see if we can find a space for them and limit in scope to that and then see what we're going to do.
Wow. So you went from 6,000 blogs to 40.
Well, technically 6,000 was all that MSDN hosted. And we came down to maybe about 100 or so that were DevDiv owned. Sorry about that. Just give me one sec.
That's what quarantine work looks like for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It happened to me too. I've had my kids come in here while we're doing recordings too, so don't feel too bad. It's pretty normal.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, so from 6,000, which is all that was hosted on MSDN, we probably came down to about 80 to 100. And we realized just the huge number of intent intentful blogs, all individual blogs, but the last time they had any content published was in 2000 and 2002. And so it was really obvious that we were not going to move any of those forward. And instead, they were moved to an archive in docs.
Yeah. Okay. So there must have been a lot of like traffic, a lot of page views on those 6,000 that turns into 100 or 800 that then now it's 40. So the 40, how does it stack up? How much traffic does that platform now handle for those 40 blogs?
We on a low, we are about, or rather I should say, on average, we are about 3.8 million a month. And
million what, users or page views or?
Unique page views.
Unique page views. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And when there are events like Build or Connect, or even smaller conferences like PyCon or the .NET conferences, we typically see a bump up, and we've gone up to as much as 5 million, I think, at one point.
Okay. So 5 million page views. And how does the platform handle that? That's a lot of traffic.
Yes, we do invest a lot of our time, my team's time, in just maintaining the platform, making sure that every time we're making a code change or an update, especially since over the past 2 years since we launched with like the bare bones functionality that a blog platform should have. So since then, we've been making a lot of changes. And with every change, we painstakingly take the effort to make sure that it is not only compliant, but performant, is not going to slow things down, looks good from branding perspective. And there's just all of these things that we need to take care of. And then even in terms of just the technology investments, we work with Akamai to have their CDNs, and continuously we're looking at how we can improve performance. We are continuously keeping an eye on where our traffic is coming from, the different geos. And there's always that difference in how the blog performs based on the geo you're coming from. So how can we target a specific geo and make sure we improve in that region? So there's all of this that happens in the back end.
Okay. And I think that's very nice that I don't have to worry too much about that, because you have a whole team that does this. You got engineers working on this full time.
Yeah.
Like how many people are you taking care of our blog platform?
We're actually just a team of 5 and me.
So 5 engineers, 1 program manager?
Yeah.
Okay. And but that's just the 40 blogs. That's not all the Microsoft blogs. That is only for the developer division, blogs, right?
Yeah. Well, DevBlogs platform, which now hosts many blogs outside of just the dev blogs.
Okay, so is this? Yeah. So are you going to be this is the platform that all of Microsoft is going to use eventually, or?
No idea. It's not what I thought of it when we started. So at the time when we were asked to move off MSDN, there were 2, and there still are, these 2 other blog. Well, only one of them actually calls themselves a blog platform, which is Cloud Blogs. The other one, which is Tech Community, is more of a community space. So they are more focused on creating a space for conversations and a forum. And then along with this space where you can have these community conversations, you also have a blog. And while that caters to some teams who are looking for that community communication, too many weird words, for that community interaction, along with the blogs, there are many who are just focused on doing that blogging, the traditional blogging space. And so that is the primary distinction between Tech Community and Dev Blogs. And I think that's why we've slowly started getting a lot of technical teams across Microsoft outside of DevDiv that want to host on Dev Blogs.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we got a question here that I think is absolutely fantastic question. Is the blog platform running on miniblog.core? I think we answered no, it's running on WordPress. But why isn't it? Why is it not running on ASP.NET, on Miniblog, which is a phenomenal blog platform out there?
It is. And actually, I'm forgetting the terminology, the technology behind it. But we did consider Azure as a space where we could host our blogs and just build something of our own other than WordPress. And we did consider the space where ASP.NET and some other blogs in the past have been. And we did do test runs, but for some reason, they just couldn't handle the traffic and the huge number of blogs that we had up at the time.
Mhm.
And so given that we were running against a timeline and could only experiment so much, after spending a couple of months trying to see if we could set up something on all these different platforms, we decided to go with WordPress because it just worked well for our needs at the time. Not to say that in the future we won't make a change, but that was the reason at the time.
That makes sense. And I, just to expand a little bit on that, because I was the one writing miniblog.core. That's why I thought it was such a great question. But miniblog.core, along with other .NET blog platforms, was designed to just be a single user blog.
Mm.
And of course, not multi-tenant, where you have a platform of 40 different blogs, right? And they can each have multiple users with different roles. Like you can be an author, an editor, and all this. So those simpler blogs, like they had great performance and all that sort of stuff, but they don't scale up to just the amount of users that and blogs that are demanded from your platform, right? You can't, they could be installed individually. So you could have 40 separate installs, but then if you wanted to make a change in one of them, you had to make it 40 times.
Yeah.
That doesn't scale so well. So, but great question.
Thanks for adding that perspective. Yeah.
All right. So a team of 5 engineers, and this is full-time engineers?
Yes, vendors. But
Okay,
yeah, this is what they're working on. This is what they're supporting.
Yeah. So that's amazing. I think that kind of blows me away a little bit, that you can, that something like blogging can actually be so big that it requires like a full team. But it does. You're making the platform better. Like month over month, there's new things coming up. There's new features. Commenting gets better. The site's performance gets faster. Like all these things. So how do you know what improvements to work on first?
Great question. We do actually get feedback from our readers on the blog site itself, and we keep an eye on that feedback and respond as often as we can and as soon as we can. And through that, we are able to identify these core themes. Like for a long time, it was just performance. The blog is so slow. And then we saw this new theme that came up a few months later about commenting is terrible. Excuse me, why does it need to be so hard for me to just submit a text comment? Or it went into moderation, I have no idea why. And similarly, we also get feedback from our internal community of blog owners. And we have a Teams channel and a chat through which people can submit feedback. And so in the first year, there was a very clear set of 3 or 4 high-level themes that we identified based on the feedback. The first one being performance, the second one being commenting, and the third one being with just editorial and just navigating the blog, because other than the top navigation, there was really no other easy way to go from one post to the next or navigate through a specific blog or from one blog to the other. And there was nothing that was tying all these different blogs together. And so based on that, our first set of priorities in first 6 to 8 months were just focused on code changes, feature updates, things like at the bottom of each post, you see read next recommendations to say, since you've seen this content, we think this is the next piece of the next topic or the next blog post that will be interesting to you. And then even in terms of just the tagging and small things like a comment count, right? If you have a comment count, that is something that was really important to our readers, and it kept coming up in feedback to say, when I'm looking at the homepage of a blog and the list of all blog posts, I have no way of knowing which of these posts has had the most interaction. That interaction of the readers and then probably someone responding back to the comments, and those are the posts I'm interested in reading. And that was a really interesting comment and feedback that we got, and we saw other feedback items coming in related to that. And so that's typically how we pick what we are going to work on. And also, I think for the first 2 years, first year and a half, till about 6 months ago, we were focused heavily on some of these core functionalities and core performance issues that we had across the platform and kept on improving them over the course of the time. And now we've gotten into the next phase. Like a few things that are coming up that we're working on is the fact that search, there's no way to search on dev blogs. Where is search? Is it hidden? And so there are all these different comments that come from our users. and something around email subscriptions, that there is an RSS feed, but I'd like to subscribe to emails subscribe so that I get the emails every time a new post is published. And so a lot of our work is based on the feedback that we get from the readers and blog authors and blog owners who are actually writing the content.
Okay, that makes sense. So you mentioned that, you said blog owners. So you're the blog platform owner, but then there are blog owners.
Yeah.
Is that right? How does that work?
So I own the platform in the sense, if there is a specific thing that's slow or broken, or if there's a particular feature and capability that you want, then you would come to me and that's something that I would help set up. But the content itself is owned by each blog owner. Let me give you an example. The .NET team owns the .NET blog content. So which post will be published on which day and who is authoring what content is managed by that team. The Visual Studio blog is owned and managed by you in terms of the content that goes on there. So you handle the calendar for it and helping edit posts if you feel like the tone's not there, or it's not matching what you want to see published on the Visual Studio blog. So when I say blog owner, it's more of a content pipeline user owner to say, okay, who's going to be an author versus an editor and who has what privileges. But providing that capability to be able to create those users and those privileges is something that I own as the platform owner.
Right. So beyond your team, there's an owner. So I'm one owner for one blog. So there's 40 different owners, right? One for each of the blogs.
Yeah.
And then you have a bunch of writers or authors that, write the like opens Word and types out the blog post and then publishes it through the WordPress stuff and all that.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people involved. That's a lot of hours spent by all these people writing blog posts, engaging in comments from the viewers and the readers rather. Do we have any idea of like how much time do we actually spend as a whole division of Microsoft on blogging? Do we even track that?
No, I have never actually calculated or thought about it. But yes, in terms of the amount of time and effort spent by all the teams and so many different individuals, it is a lot. Because even if a blog content owner may not be writing content by themselves, they are heavily involved in which content gets published on which day. And typically blogs will have a group of editors, like say 3 or 5 individuals, who at least one of them has to sign off on each blog post that gets published. So there is a level of technicality or a level of branding, or even just what content one wants to talk about, that is maintained, and that consistency that's maintained. So when a reader comes to the blog, they don't see one post that's talking at 100 level and another one that's at a 400 level. And, one of them is filled with code blocks and the other one has nothing. So there is that expectation and that consistency that needs to be maintained from post to post. And so there's a lot of hours that are spent, and across multiple individuals and teams. And so one of the things that my team does try to do, and that's why we take this feedback from our blog owners and authors so seriously, is because we do realize the amount of time that goes into this. And if there's anything we can do to improve it, make it faster, make it easier, we try to prioritize those features.
Yeah. So, I'm one of those owners, and I'll say I think you do a fantastic job, because I just really enjoy that we have an internal Teams channel like you were mentioning. And whenever you make some updates, you just post it out there. I'm like, oh, wow, I can now do this, or the users are now able to do that. And it's like coming out of nowhere, and it's like feels so great.
Yay! Thank you.
Because it makes our lives easier, right? And so there are certain things around Microsoft where we don't really know the cost necessarily of maintaining certain things. Like, for instance, the blog. How much does it actually cost if you add up all the hours of writing blog posts and all that sort of stuff? How much does it actually cost us to manage these blog posts, or these blogs? We don't necessarily know. And so making it as easy as possible for the people that are behind doing all the writing, doing all the staging and publishing through the system is it's just fantastic. I really enjoy it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so when it comes to comments, I mean, we get some spam now and again. We get some positive comments. We get some negative comments, and I think everyone does that. All blogs around the world. We know how it is, like anonymous people, sitting behind the screen. Sometimes those comments are not very nice. And I know in the past we've had like some of the people at Microsoft, they felt like they were attacked personally in those comments and so on. What do we do on the comments to make that kind of a friendly place?
This is a hard topic. This is a difficult one for various reasons. One of them being that when I, for example, purchase something from any shop, right? There's this one shop, I make 10 different purchases, buying 10 different things, and I have 9 really good experiences, but there's one that goes horribly wrong. That's the one I'm going to talk about. That's the one I'm going to reach out about. And obviously, I'm really frustrated, angry, upset, and that is going to come through in the comments. So these are all legitimate comments sometimes where customers are really upset about something that happened, right? Either with respect to a new feature or a feature that was deprecated. It could go either ways. And so while now in my sane state, I recognize that. And the feedback I typically give blog owners and authors of the content is that put yourself in the customer's shoes, in the reader's shoes, and try to understand why they're giving you that feedback. And you don't have to respond to the emotions of it at all. More often than not, what readers and commenters are looking for is an acknowledgement that, yes, we understand you ran into this issue, or we apologize and this is not our intention. And so half the job is done right there rather than being defensive about it. And then, of course, the second half is how do you actually address that feedback and what you can do and what you cannot do to actually fix the problem for the customer or for the reader of your post. They're one and the two sometimes, one and the same sometimes. But that makes it really hard because obviously the individuals who have written a blog post have, more often than not, they are the PMs and engineers who have worked on that feature. So they've spent many months working on this feature, working on this capability that they are excited about, that they think solves a particular problem. And they are not perfect. So they may not have always got it right. They may have had a certain perception. And when they push out the code for it, they push out this feature, they have gone through the efforts of writing this blog post and it pans. They get negative feedback. It's really hard on them emotionally as an individual to say, okay, I'm just going to completely shut out the emotions of these, I don't want to say negative comments, but they are complaints, they're customer complaints, right? And it becomes really hard for the individuals to shut that down and just respond to the content part of the comment. And that's where it gets really hard. And we try to make it easy by making sure they get an email notification, making sure that there is this V team that we have where me and other PMs are part of the V team where we can help you respond to comments. We have guidance that we have published internally on how to respond to comments. What phrasing to use? How do you get around the emotions bit of it? At what point do you say, okay, this feels like spam, or this feels like it's beyond my capacity to be able to respond in a way where it makes sense because I'm not the one who's making the decision to solve this problem. So I need to involve someone else. Like that sort of guidance to understand that this is beyond the individual author and it's just a customer having an issue, and how do you deal with that from that perspective? Yeah. But like I said, there's emotions involved on both sides, and that's why it gets really tricky. From a platform point of view, we have continuously been upgrading the commenting system where we try to catch spam, first of all, so that that's not taking away the time of the blog author in trying to blog author in terms of reading the comments and spending that time identifying, is it a spam comment or not? And apart from the spam filtering, we have our own filters of approved list of domains from which, if links are added from there, it's approved automatically or not. And just to make it easier so that there's that moderation bit that's hopefully not going to take as much time from the blog authors, from the blog post author. But then there's that other part where automation can only go so far, especially in the technical space, because words like fired are actual legitimate words with respect to an event getting fired for some code, something, right? Compared to saying an individual should be fired because this feature is not working. And so creating AI that can actually distinguish between that level of emotion when the words used are the same, they're written out, they're spelled the same way, but the emotion behind them is different, can get really hard. Or even the example of gaming, where you see words like you killed it, right? Kill would be a negative word. So if we were to create this list of words to say any word that is from this list, you just put the comment for moderation or don't approve it, but it could actually mean a really positive and a good thing in a lot of technical spaces. And so that's why, with respect to automation, while we have a lot of spam filtering and catching comments before they get approved to say, maybe this should be moderated and someone should take a look at it, we can only go so far. So it's typically a finely balanced dance between automated tools and human beings and blog authors responding to these comments, and then leadership and others coming in to say, okay, we're seeing comments on this post that are all along the same theme. So this is beyond this one individual who needs to be addressed. And how do we take this back to the drawing board and then come back with a response? So it's a space that's really complex and involves a lot of these different things.
Yeah. It sounds like it's pretty complex. Those are some great examples there with the fired and you killed it.
These are actual examples.
I wouldn't have thought of that. I guess. Because I know that on the Visual Studio blog, so each of the blog owners, so I own the Visual Studio blog's content, I can go in and log in on the WordPress and go in and say, here's some words that if they show up, don't post it, like mark it for moderation.
Yeah.
But it turned out that was not very flexible for that exact reason. So we've actually turned up, I think, the manual approval a little bit, because it turned out that the automation was just very difficult. It's a lot of very technical things that you on a Visual Studio blog, of course.
Yeah.
So we do it manually, but it seems like it's been a long time since we've had to like not take a comment because it was too mean or it was inappropriate or something like that. I feel like it used to happen a lot more, and now it kind of doesn't happen much, either because you get in there first or the system has approved or something like that, and I just don't see it. But is that what happened? Are we getting better at it?
I think we're getting better at it from both points of view. My team, so one individual on my team, one engineer on my team is actually tasked with keeping an eye on performance every day. And another one is keeping an eye on comments and seeing if anything comes in that gets missed by the spam filter or gets approved, but we don't think it should be, and then we mark it for moderation. So yes, there's a lot of manual work that's the platform team, that my team does, so that the blog authors, the content authors, don't have to put in that effort. It's kind of been taken care of for them, at least before it gets approved and put into moderation. But the other side of the thing is that I think slowly but steadily, we are learning how to respond to comments, which I think in turn is changing how our readers respond to us and what kind of comments we get. So I think as we are improving our processes and methodology for responding to comments, we are not getting as many rude or inappropriate comments these days. At least that's what I feel.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. We tend to have more of those in the past. I've noticed that when you get one of those kind of angry comments that you were mentioning earlier, like they're full of emotion, they're negative, they're like, why didn't you fix this? Or I've asked you so many times over the years and Visual Studio still doesn't have this feature, something like that, and be really angry. I've figured out that if you answer sort of without talking to the emotions, like what you're saying, you're just, answering on the factual things, maybe asking for clarification on one aspect of things, and then talk about what we've done in the space, and then their tone in their next comment completely flips. They come back, they're really happy that there's engagement from the product team, and they're happy to see that, and then they might clarify, and they might still be angry, but the tone doesn't show anger. It's like, okay, let's actually try to, we can solve this instead and be more pragmatic about it and solution oriented, instead of just like doubling down on the problem, right? You stating your problem super emotionally, and like, well, let's understand the problem first, and then we talk about a solution. And then it seems like, I don't know if that's what happened, that over the time, people kind of just stopped being very emotional. And when they write, I mean, we still get some emotional comments, but they seem to be a bit less harsh.
Yes. Yeah. I think the emotions definitely still exist, but I don't think they're as harsh, because I think earlier there was this perception and impression that Microsoft all up ignores customers or ignores comments, or are they even reading the comments and the feedback that we're giving? And I feel like the teams have worked at it in improving their processes. We have tried to improve the platform so that the blog post authors don't need to come to the post to see if there are any new comments. So for every new comment, the post author automatically gets it in their email, a notification to say, hey, you have a new comment. And so even if they don't respond immediately, and there's a typical time like given, at least they were informed about it immediately, and they have the opportunity to respond within 24 hours, and much sooner than they would have if they check comments only at the end of a day, or they miss a particular day and they see it only once in every 2-3 days. So there are all these different things that have been put in place. And I know, Mads, you've been looking at the feedback that we've been getting outside of the blog space to see how we can triage them, and bringing the teams together and keeping them accountable for, this is an important space. And so I feel like even internally, in general, the attitude towards customer feedback and the need to respond to them, and not just respond with, I feel like I've not seen this in a while, but by design, was a thing that we used to be teased by our readers and customers about, that, oh yeah, you're just going to market as by design. But I feel like I've not even heard that phrase. We have moved away from it, and our readers have moved away from it. I don't think I've heard that as a poke at us in a long time, because we don't do that. We do take the feedback seriously. We try to respond as soon as possible. And so I feel like that shift is happening, not just in blog comments, but in other aspects of wherever we get customer feedback from.
Yeah, I agree. And here's a comment on that. As you became more open as a company, there's perhaps less unheard frustration building up. That kind of speaks to what you're saying, right? Maybe it goes noticed that we are really trying, and I think we've been like doubling down. I know from I've been involved on what you're saying, the customer feedback on developer community.
Right. Yeah.
Which is a way for people to open support tickets, not support tickets, bug reports and feature requests on Visual Studio.
Yep.
And it used to be that sometimes some of these feature requests or bug reports, they would kind of fall through the cracks and like land somewhere where no one would see them. And but that is now completely a thing of the past. Like we really cleaned up everything, and everything is all the owners internally are being notified whenever a piece of feedback comes in that we need to take action on. And it's a completely different world now, I think, in how we internally handle this today versus just a few years ago.
Yeah. Yep.
And so the same is true for the blogs and probably most other places. And that's just wonderful. And I love that the blogs are experiencing that as well, because it can be very frustrating, to get those harsh comments. It doesn't feel good. Let's say you spent 6 months or maybe a year on this killer feature that you're so proud of.
Yeah.
And then you're just being like torn apart in the comments, right? Because you didn't think of XYZ, or someone just doesn't feel that the feature wasn't perfect for them.
Yeah.
Like for their very unique use case, and then just, let you hear about it in harsh terms. And so that's wonderful.
I think on that note, I'd just like to add one more thing, Mads, that I think we've also improved in how we write our content. Mm-hmm. I feel like just even 5 years ago, the way we would write our content, our announcement posts when something would go live, a new feature, or how we talked about a certain capability was very cut and dry, where we would just say that there is this new feature that we've launched, and we would the way the content would flow in a post would be very different, where it would be about how we've done an awesome job, right? Or it would be about this killer feature that is going to be the solution to all of world's problems. Not that we didn't feel that way, or we don't feel that way anymore, but I feel like the perspective has changed to now even write our content in terms of, hey, there are some customers who face this XYZ problem, and we feel like this is going to solve that problem, and this is how you go about it. I also feel like we have a lot more videos showing you how to walk through to set up a certain thing, or how a particular feature works, or how it helps you, kind of recreating the problem and then recreating the solution, or sharing more code blocks. So there's a sea change that I've seen in even how the content's being written, and that makes a big difference to how it is perceived.
Yeah. And just now you were mentioning all the videos. So if you're into Visual Studio on YouTube, then go to youtube.com/Visual Studio. We actually have a bunch of stuff up there. It's not just this particular show that's hosted on that address, but we have tips and tricks and getting started videos and all sorts of content to help with some of those. Sometimes, like what you were saying, Radhika, like the user's facing a problem. Here's how we think you can solve it.
Yeah.
Or here's something we've done. Here's a feature we've added that might be helpful to you in certain situations.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to do so many just announcements like, hey, this is a new thing. This is a new thing. And now it's pretty much everything. Like we can even write blog posts now on features that have been in the product for years, but people might not know about them.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of wonderful.
Yeah, we did have that perspective as well, that we should only be talking about new things that we are launching, only the new features, and that's what our customers want. Mm-hmm. But that isn't always true, because you're getting new customers, new students who are using Visual Studio for the first time, and they have no idea what you're talking about, what they've gotten into. And so these tips and tricks, or these, hey, there's this particular capability from way back when, but we still get so much of usage and it's really useful, talking about those things. And I think, again, in terms of change of perspective in how we write content, what kind of content we write, has also improved just our interaction with the community.
Yeah. So here's a comment. That was not the one. This one. Excellent post quality. So that's awesome. But in my experience, the engagement from the blog team has been far less than one would hope. So I think this is true for all feedback that we get, right? We can't fix every bug, and we can't provide all features that have ever been requested. So there's always a balance and a prioritization that happens.
Yeah.
And that's true for Visual Studio, the product. And I take it's true for the blog platform as well.
Yeah, we do. So I don't know if the feedback that's being referred to here is from the platform team or from a specific blog team. But if it is from a blog, then, in terms of comments and responses through that. So I can't speak to the content from a blog team, because it's up to the authors and the blog owners to manage their comment moderation and how they look at it. But if it is feedback on the blog platform, which is given through the blue feedback button, typically on the blog, we do try to respond back individually. If you've left an email address, even if it's a feature that we're not working on right now, we try to respond back with, thank you for the feedback. This was not on our backlog, but we've added it now. We have other priorities, but we'll soon get to it. And we try to keep a list of these emails and typically respond back to say, hey, 6 months later, we finally got to this. Go check it out and let us know what you think. So yeah, we do try to keep it up. But like you said, Mads, unfortunately, things do get missed. I would just ask this individual to probably post a comment again if it's on the blog post, or if it's about the platform, please do reach out to us again, and hopefully we'll respond to you this time.
Exactly. It's a hard one. If it's on the blogs, then it's not your team. Then it's whoever wrote the blog post is not engaging with the comments as well or as enough. One thing that I've noticed is that there are some comments that are either hard to process for us because they're could be very emotional, or they just make a statement without a question. Like, how do you engage with statements? Like, it seems like they're the last word of the any conversation that had been, right? If they're not inviting you to come in and expand and have a dialogue. And there's a bunch of variations of that where I feel like sometimes it just ends, and the last comment is that of the users, not from the Microsoft program manager or engineer. But it can be hard. And if so, for this particular comment, if it's one of those situations, please send a link in the description here, or hook on Twitter, reach out to me or something like that, and let's figure out if there's an answer that needs to be posted. But it's not easy.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad you brought up the part about reaching individual employees directly. And that's not just for this individual, but I'm going to put it out there that a lot of times feedback is forwarded to me by Mads, you, right? Or others as to, hey, I saw this on Twitter, and either it is for the platform, and then of course I can act on it, or it is for another blog, and you may not know who the owner is or who owns that content, but you can reach out to me, and then I typically forward it to the individual teams to say, hey, there's this feedback on your post, or there's a comment, and could you please go and address it or make changes as needed. So there is that workflow. It's a little long drawn, but we try to address it as soon as we can.
Right. So you mentioned this, but we didn't talk about it. Spam. I remember blogging back in like 2006, 2007, when I started blogging like personal blogs. Spam was becoming an issue. Like all these automated robots, basically, that would send links to things, and a bunch of other things. Now they're way more sophisticated. They make it sound like they're commenting on the content of the blog post, but then they're putting in a link that they want viewers to click to go somewhere to buy their things, or maybe to, I don't know, something bad, right? How do we handle that on the platform?
Yeah, actually, we did face that same issue, I think a few months ago, where even though we have a spam filter, a tool and a service that we use for filtering spam, and so every comment goes through that filter before it gets approved. But like you said, Matt, some of them are now really sophisticated, where they use words and phrasing from the content of the post. And so the AI of the spam filter can't really identify and lands up approving these comments. And so what we have done on the platform is, in addition to the spam filter, we have a list of other rules and processes that we go through to check on the comment content before we actually mark it as approved. And instead we mark it for moderation. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the things is that we have this approved list of domains, from where if you have links that are part of these domains, then the comment is approved. But otherwise, even if the spam filter approved it, but it has a link that is outside of these, we'd mark it for moderation. So it doesn't get approved. It doesn't show outside to the reader. But internally, we do a manual moderation of those comments.
Okay. All right. So there's another type of comment that I guess we don't use as much. So back in the day, if you could do refer spam.
Yeah, backlinks.
Yeah. Because blog posts, sometimes they would list at the bottom, they would list like pages around the internet that links to this blog post.
Mm-hmm.
But you could then manipulate that, so you could basically hack that system kind of just by using HTTP. It wasn't like hacking in that sense, but you could add like all these bad links in there too that way. But we don't even do that anymore, do we? Like list those.
It is now an additional feature that the commenting system has a checkbox for. And so if we were to enable it, then it would then land up adding these referral links and comments that would show up in your blog post. But we have that turned off. I don't even know why you would have that as an option, but it's turned off.
Well, I think like back in the day, it was because there was a conversation going. So you could have like in your comments, you could say, hey, if some other blog post somewhere is talking about your blog post, that's kind of like a comment. That's kind of like a very elaborate comment. And so people would put that in their in their comment thread. I think that makes a lot of sense, but also it opens up for all this sort of spam. unfortunately.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that was also useful before advanced telemetry tools came about, because that was then a good way for you to track how many people were talking about you and had linked back to you. Like, how much of traffic were you going to get from this potential comment or blog post that had some content in there and then was linking to your post. But now with advanced telemetry for just identifying referrals and where your traffic's coming from, not to identify individuals, but just to get a general sense of where your readers are, right? Who they are, where they are from. So I think even because of that, it's really no longer, even if there was a hint of positivity to having that sort of a feature, I think that is negated by having better telemetry these days.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I just get nostalgic when I think about blogging because I was very much into it back in the day. I don't have time for it much these days, other than the Visual Studio blog. I do blog there sometimes, but not my personal. Do you have a blog?
No, I don't. Interestingly, I have never been a writer or editor of content. When I first started owning the content on the Visual Studio blog, I actually took editorial tips from John Mont, who was an editor back in the day. And so he was my mentor in the space in learning to, how do you write content in a way that readers find it interesting, or just grammatically not being a native English speaker, where does the comma go in a sentence like this, just so it's grammatically correct. And so pretty much every post I would write, or I would ghostwrite for John Mont, and that would go through a lot of editorial from him. And so a big learning experience from him.
Yeah, he became the vice president for Visual Studio and other aspects too. But I think also he has like a big degree in like Russian literature or something like that. He's really good at writing. And
I think in a previous life sometime he was an editor of some magazine or newspaper or something. So.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There's all these hidden talents with people. Not everyone came straight from college and got a job at Microsoft, right? They came from the industry sometimes in very different fields.
Yeah.
So, all right. You know what, Radhika, this has been awesome. I've learned a lot today. I hope our viewers have as well. But our time is up. We spent a full hour, and here you were wondering, could we spend a full hour? Yes, of course. Of course.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating to learn about this stuff because it's a blog is like probably not what people think about as being like a big apparatus and a big production, but it is. And
it is. Takes effort, but we enjoy it and we are proud of it. So thanks for being an author and owner of of one of the blogs, and thanks for having me here. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, great seeing you. And for everyone out there, go check out the blogs if you haven't already. It's devblogs.microsoft.com, and check out what blog posts are there. Comment. We'll try to answer all the comments you have on any of the very fascinating and interesting blog posts that, of course, exist on that platform. So with that, it is the end of the show. I hope to see you next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.